I still remember the exact moment my phone buzzed and my stomach dropped, because the message wasn't even meant for me, and yet it changed how I saw my own sister forever. A friend sent me a photo, laughing, saying, "Didn't know your sister moved into your cabin full time." And there it was, clear as day, my mountain cabin, my porch, my handmade wooden railing, and my sister's entire family smiling in front of it, like they owned the place. I hadn't given permission. I hadn't even been asked. And standing there, hundreds of miles away, staring at that photo, all I could think was, how did it come to this? And was I wrong for what I eventually did to make her regret it? Let me ask you this right now, before I tell you anything else. If your own family secretly took over something you worked years to build, something deeply personal to you, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you finally draw a line, even if it blew everything up? Because that's the question I've been asking myself ever since. I need to go back to the beginning, because this didn't start with a stolen cabin. It started years ago, with me being the responsible one and my older sister, Laura, being the free spirit. Growing up, everyone always joked that Laura was the sun and I was the shadow. She was loud, charming, impulsive. I was quiet, methodical, and painfully aware of consequences. Our parents leaned on me early. If something needed planning, budgeting, fixing, it was me. Laura floated through life, and somehow things always worked out for her, until they didn't. After college, I worked nonstop. I skipped vacations, lived in tiny apartments, drove a car that rattled every time I hit the brakes. My dream was simple but intense. I wanted a place that was mine, somewhere quiet, somewhere I could breathe. When I first visited the mountains during a solo road trip, something clicked. The air felt cleaner, the silence felt earned. I started saving obsessively. It took nearly a decade, but eventually, I bought a small, weathered cabin tucked into a pine-covered slope. It wasn't fancy. It creaked in winter and leaked in spring, but I fixed it up piece by piece with my own hands. Every nail, every coat of stain, every repaired window frame felt like a small victory. Laura knew all of this. She'd visited once years ago with her husband Mark and their 2 kids. At the time, she gushed about how cute it was and joked about how it looked like something out of a movie. I remember her saying, half laughing, "You know, if you ever get bored of it, we could totally live here." I laughed it off. It sounded like a joke. I didn't realize then that she was testing a boundary. Over the years, Laura's life got more complicated. Mark bounced between jobs. They moved often. Money was always tight, though somehow there was always money for vacations, new gadgets, or impulsive purchases. Every family gathering turned into subtle comments. "Must be nice to have a place you can escape to." Some people don't know how lucky they are. I learned to smile and change the subject. I told myself it wasn't worth the tension. I used the cabin sparingly. A few weekends a year, sometimes a full week if work allowed. Most of the time it sat empty, and yes, I knew that. But empty didn't mean abandoned. It meant waiting. It meant potential. It meant mine. Then, last fall, Laura called me out of the blue. She sounded unusually sweet. Too sweet. She asked about my job, my health, how often I was getting to the cabin these days. There was a pause. And then she said, "You know, the kids have been begging to see the mountains again. We've been thinking about a little getaway." My guard went up immediately. I told her I wasn't sure when I'd be up there next. She laughed and said, "Oh, no, not your cabin. We were just talking in general." I believed her, or maybe I wanted to. A few weeks later, she sent me photos of the kids hiking, roasting marshmallows, smiling in what looked suspiciously like familiar scenery. I asked where they were. She replied, "Oh, just a rental up north." Something felt off, but I didn't push. That was my mistake. The real bomb dropped when my neighbor near the cabin, an older guy named Tom who helped keep an eye on the place, called me. He asked casually, "Hey, are your relatives staying long?" I felt my chest tighten. I asked what he meant. He said, "Well, they've been there almost 2 weeks now. Kids, dog, whole setup." I couldn't even speak for a moment. When I finally asked how they got in, he said, "They had keys." Keys. My hands were shaking. There were only 2 sets, mine and the spare I kept locked in a small safe hidden inside the cabin. A safe only Laura had seen once years ago when I stupidly showed her around, proud of my little system. I confronted her immediately. I called, texted, left voicemails. When she finally answered, she sounded annoyed, like I was inconveniencing her. I asked her directly why she was in my cabin without asking. She sighed and said, "Oh my God, calm down. We're family. You weren't using it." I told her that wasn't the point. She said, "We needed somewhere to stay for a bit. Things have been rough." I asked how long a bit was. She said, "We'll see." That night I didn't sleep. Anger mixed with guilt, confusion, and this old familiar feeling of being the one expected to absorb everything quietly. I told myself maybe it was temporary, maybe she'd realize she crossed a line. But then Tom sent me another message. He said they'd put up decorations. A swing for the kids, a new lock on the shed. A new lock. That's when it hit me she wasn't visiting. She was settling in. I drove up there the following weekend, heart pounding the entire way. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, my breath caught. Their car was parked crookedly like it belonged there. Toys were scattered across the porch. My porch. I walked inside without knocking, because why should I knock on my own door? The smell hit me first. Cooking, clutter, someone else's life layered over mine. Laura looked up from the kitchen like she was surprised to see me. Mark gave an awkward nod. The kids froze. I asked Laura, calmly at first, what was going on. She rolled her eyes and said, "We're staying here for a while. Rent, free places are hard to come by." I reminded her it wasn't rent-free. It was mine. She laughed and said, "You don't even live here." That sentence cut deeper than anything else she'd said. I told her she needed to leave. She said I was being selfish. Mark chimed in, saying family helps family. Laura accused me of choosing a building over my own blood. The kids started crying. I felt like a monster, standing there, asking them to leave. And that's how she controlled the situation, by turning me into the villain. I left without resolving anything. I told her we'd talk later. On the drive back, my hands were tight on the steering wheel, my mind racing. I wasn't just angry. I was hurt, betrayed, confused about how easily she'd dismissed my boundaries. Over the next few weeks, the situation escalated quietly. Laura stopped answering my calls. When she did respond to texts, they were short and dismissive. Tom told me they were receiving mail at the cabin now. Mail. Packages. I checked the utility usage online and saw spikes I'd never seen before. She was fully living there. I talked to friends. Some told me to be firm. Others warned me not to ruin the family. My parents took Laura's side, saying she just needed help and that I could afford to be generous. That hurt almost as much as what Laura did. It felt like everyone assumed my hard work made me obligated to sacrifice. And that's where I need to pause and ask you something. Imagine being in my place right then. Your sister has moved her entire family into your property without permission. Everyone expects you to let it go because, family, you're torn between guilt and anger, between peace and self-respect. Before I tell you what I did next, before I tell you how this all exploded, I want you to stop and think. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have let them stay, hoping it wouldn't become permanent, or would you have taken action, even if it meant becoming the bad guy in everyone's story? Because in the next part, I'm going to tell you exactly how I decided to stop being quiet, how I took control back, and how what happened next made my sister regret ever stepping foot in my cabin. And trust me, once things started moving, there was no going back. By the time I reached that breaking point, the silence from Laura felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. Days turned into weeks, and every update from Tom twisted the knife a little deeper. He told me about late night bonfires, loud music echoing through the trees, unfamiliar cars pulling up and staying overnight, strangers at my cabin. The place I went to escape noise and people had become a hub of chaos. And the worst part was knowing my own sister didn't feel even a hint of guilt about it. I tried one last time to reason with her before doing anything drastic. I drove back up on a weekday, hoping Mark would be at work and the kids at school so I could talk to her alone. When I arrived, the cabin looked different again. Wind chimes hung from the porch. Potted plants lined the steps. It looked lived in, claimed, almost smug. Laura was inside, scrolling on her phone like she owned the couch I'd built myself. I told her we needed to talk seriously. She sighed dramatically and said, "If this is about us staying, we've already talked about that." I told her no, we hadn't. She'd talked, and I'd been steamrolled. I explained, slowly and clearly, that she had never asked permission, that this was trespassing, that she needed to leave by the end of the week. Her face changed then. The sweetness vanished. She accused me of threatening her family, of being heartless, of abandoning her when she needed me most. She said things I'll never forget, like how I was obsessed with property, and probably happier alone with a stupid cabin than with real people. I felt something inside me snap, but I stayed calm. I told her she had 5 days. She laughed in my face and said, "You won't do anything. You never do." And that, right there, was when I realized this wasn't just about the cabin. This was about how she saw me, someone who would always back down. I left without another word. On the drive home, my hands were steady for the first time in weeks. The decision felt heavy, but it also felt right. I called a lawyer the next morning. Saying the words out loud felt surreal, like I was betraying my own blood, but the lawyer didn't flinch. He asked simple questions. Did they have a lease? No. Written permission? No. How long had they been there? Long enough to complicate things, but not long enough to make it impossible. He warned me about something that made my stomach drop: squatters' rights. Depending on how long they stayed, this could turn into a nightmare. The urgency became real. This wasn't just emotional anymore. It was legal. I sent Laura a formal notice to vacate, certified mail. Very official, very cold. I hated myself for it, but I knew if I didn't do this properly, I might actually lose my own cabin. When she received it, all hell broke loose. My phone exploded with messages. Angry voicemails. Texts calling me cruel, accusing me of traumatizing her kids. She told our parents I was kicking her family out onto the street. They called me in tears, begging me to reconsider, saying family doesn't solve problems with lawyers. I almost caved. I really did. The guilt was crushing. I kept picturing the kids' faces, the way they'd looked scared when I confronted Laura that first time. But then Tom called again. He told me there had been a party. He said one of the guests backed into my fence and broke part of it. No apology. No attempt to fix it. That was it. Whatever doubt I had left evaporated. Laura ignored the notice. The 5 days passed. Then 10. Then 2 weeks. She was daring me to follow through, so I did. I filed for eviction. The day the papers were served, Laura showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was hysterical. Crying, screaming, demanding to know how I could do this to her. Neighbors peeked through their doors. She accused me of ruining her marriage, her kids' lives, her future. I stood there, numb, listening as she unloaded years of resentment I didn't even know she carried. Apparently, my stability made her feel inferior. My cabin was proof that I'd won some imaginary competition between us. I told her quietly that this wasn't a competition, but she didn't hear me, or maybe she didn't want to. The court date came faster than I expected. Laura tried to delay it, claiming she had verbal permission. She didn't. The judge asked for proof. There was none. Sitting there, watching my sister scramble, watching her confidence crumble, was one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. The eviction was granted. She had 30 days to leave. Those 30 days were hell. She trashed me to everyone who would listen. Family members stopped calling me. Some blocked me outright. Online, vague posts appeared about betrayal and greed. I stayed quiet. I focused on work, on therapy, on reminding myself that boundaries don't make you evil. When the final day came, I drove up to the cabin again, this time with a locksmith scheduled for later that afternoon. Laura was packing when I arrived, boxes everywhere. The kids were silent. Mark wouldn't look at me. Laura didn't scream this time. She just looked tired, broken. She told me I'd get what was coming to me. that I'd regret this. They left that evening. Watching their car disappear down the mountain road was strange, relief mixed with grief. It felt like a chapter closing, not just for the cabin, but for my relationship with my sister as I knew it. What I didn't expect was what I found after they were gone. Damage I hadn't seen at first. Scratches on the floors, burn marks near the fire pit, missing tools. My spare key gone, and worst of all, my safe was open, empty. Not much was inside, but the violation cut deep. She hadn't just taken my space. She'd taken my trust and smashed it. I changed every lock, installed cameras, put up no trespassing signs. The cabin felt colder for a while, like it was mourning with me. But slowly, as I cleaned and repaired, it started to feel like mine again. Months passed. Laura didn't speak to me. Neither did some family members. But then, something unexpected happened. Mark called me. Alone. He apologized. He said living there hadn't fixed anything. It had made things worse. Laura had assumed the cabin would solve their problems, but it didn't. When they were forced to leave, reality hit hard. They separated shortly after. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that, just sadness, and maybe a quiet understanding that enabling someone doesn't actually help them. Eventually, Laura reached out too. A short message, no apology, just, "I hope you're happy." I replied honestly. I said I was at peace, that I wished her well, but that things would never be the same, and that was the truth. Now, when I sit on that porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I think about how close I came to losing everything that place represented to me, not just the cabin, but my sense of self-worth. Standing up for myself cost me relationships. It hurt, but it also taught me something I wish I'd learned sooner. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to your life. Love doesn't mean surrendering your boundaries. And being kind doesn't mean being silent. So now I'll ask you one last time. Was I wrong for what I did? Would you have handled it differently, or would you have done the same to protect something you worked so hard for? If you were on my side, like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, because trust me, life has no shortage of messes like this one. And share your final thoughts in the comments, because I read them all. I'll see you in the next story.